Welcome to the B Block Podcast. It is Brandon Scott here. I appreciate you for joining me. However it is you get your podcast, make sure you are subscribed on the podcast channel on the YouTube. It is a Foolish Club media partnership, so shout out to them as well. Let's start this thing off with some local flavor, man, because we did get OTAs, or at least the start of Texans OTAs. I was out there for the first day on Wednesday, and there were some observations. I got to share some of them on the morning show with Seth Payne, and I guess I can do the quick shout out before I get into it. I will be doing the morning show on Sports Radio 610 in for Sean Pendergast. Did it on Thursday as I'm recording this. Gonna do it again on Friday. Gonna do it again on Monday before I'm turned over to the drive. So a lot of radio over the next several days, Payne and Pendergast over the next few mornings, and then next week starting Tuesday, I believe, I'll be doing the drive. But a couple of things that we got into when it comes to Texans OTAs and some of the observations, the things that stood out were honestly the quarterback and the offensive line. Those were the big stories and the big revelations. And I would say this first thing wasn't necessarily a revelation or something to be super concerned about, but it is a talker. It is something that's got people discussing things. And that's CJ Stroud not throwing on the first day of OTAs. Look, we don't want to or need to make more out of that than what's necessary, but it does stand out when the team is doing its first workout with a new offense and a new offensive coordinator and play caller, a new offensive line, a new offensive line coach, new terminology, and all of the physical part is mostly light. And what you're getting, the value of being there is the mental rep and just kind of just going through it all. And CJ Stroud, to be clear, was there, was participating, was engaged, was interacting with the younger players. Like CJ, no question about CJ Stroud as like the leader of this offense, certainly, and probably of this entire team going into year 3. But it is noteworthy when that guy is, for whatever reason, managed in a specific way where he's not doing all the things on a basic workout to start the season. And again, this, or just to start the offseason, the voluntary offseason programming. And again, this is not to make a mountain out of a molehill, so to speak, but it is to point out, like, the other side of the large conversation that we've been having about the offensive line, and we will talk about the offensive line that they put out there, not to make too much of that, but we can only go off of what we've seen. The big part of this offensive line conversation has so much to do with not only the performance of the offensive line and how it limits you offensively and how good you can actually be, but it also has direct ramifications on the health of your young quarterback, of your most important player, and what is soon to be the biggest investment on the team. And so, look, I'm not here to alarm anybody or to tell anybody that CJ Stroud is hurt or that there are like issues with Stroud. And like, I think Stroud's going to be fine. If there was something larger going on with CJ Stroud, I do feel like either I would know about it or I would know somebody who would know about it, and it'd be out there and we'd be having a totally different conversation. It's not so much about how injured CJ Stroud is. It's just the fact that we know he was banged up last year, and it has ramifications on how they're managing him now. And it stresses, at least to me, the importance of getting that offensive line right and like taking it more seriously than I feel like a lot of folks felt like the Texans took it. Now, I'm not here to say that they didn't take it seriously. I think they did. I just don't. I'm not sure if they did as good of a job as I wanted them to, as many wanted them to. But the urgency is there. The urgency is there when you think about, hey, look, if he's 100%, there's no reason for him not to be doing 100% of the things. Like that part just makes it, especially at this point in the offseason. And I would say credit to the Texans for properly managing their prized asset, their prize player here, the franchise quarterback. But like, it's not a criticism on how he's being managed or the fact that he's being managed. I think that that part of it is clear and obvious and smart. If he's got anything that he's dealing with, there's no reason to expose him to anything, to any kind of risk, any kind of unnecessary risk. I'm with that part. I just can't help but think about how often this guy got hit last year, how under duress CJ Stroud was in the pocket last year, and how much that seemed to impact his actual play, like the actual quality of play, whether it was not trusting what he was seeing in front of him or around him, or if it was a matter of dealing with the injury and the actual physical impact of getting banged up, getting beat up, and running for your life and always being picked up off the ground. So I mean, I don't want that for CJ Stroud. Nobody wants that for CJ Stroud. I don't think the Texans want that for CJ Stroud. I think they're doing the best that they can, but at the same time, it does make you think like what so like there is a lot of pressure on getting this whole thing right. Like, you have now put CJ Stroud's future in the hands of or like in the in the confidence of the coaching and tutelage of first year offensive coordinator Nick Caley, first year offensive line coach Cole Popovich, and a collection of experienced, even if underachieving as of late, guys, bringing them together, and we're going to make that work. Like, we're putting CJ Stroud's future in the hopes and dreams of that. Like, and forgive me for not necessarily having the exact better option, but it did feel like during the offseason, you looked around, there were teams that operated with more of a sense of urgency. And maybe it wasn't even that. Maybe it was more of just having better fortune and being able to strike deals that the Texans were not able to. But they didn't address this offensive line in a real serious way. It felt like, I know they signed Cam Robinson to, $12 million or whatever it was, but it didn't seem like they made a serious acquisition in this thing until they traded up in the second round to draft Ariante Ursery, who we will talk about also in just a moment. But that is what it is. And there you're looking at, hey, the quarterback is there. We're confident in him. In fact, we're excited to watch him play, but we're a little worried about dude. We're a little bit worried about what they've got around there, and they've got a lot to prove in that way, and it's going to be real critical. It was the difference, a huge part of the difference in the offense, going from not going from mediocre to good. I thought the offense the year before that was good, and it was part of the reason why it wasn't quite great. But somehow the offensive line play was even better that year. It's got to be better. It's got to be better, and that is the big takeaway of CJ Stroud not throwing it. It isn't necessarily that he's injured or what his injury actually is. It's that this is the price that you could pay. This is what the risk could look like. A hobbled or less than version of CJ Stroud because the offensive line isn't right. So that stood out, and that was something that I talked about on the morning show. The other big thing, and probably the most surprising headline, was the first look at the Texans' new offensive line. I thought this was the big surprise of the day. CJ Stroud not necessarily participating in all of the team or throwing in all of the team drills. I don't know if that was as shocking as much as it was like, put a pin in that, raise your eyebrow just a little bit. But he was out there, and he's the quarterback, and it's all good, whatever. This first look at the Texans offensive line, though, did have some surprises. Even if you don't necessarily buy it as being all of that revealing, I would still present it to you as follows and see what you think. And feel free to just hit me up wherever you can find me. But Cam Robinson at left tackle, Laken Tomlinson at left guard, Jake Andrews at center, the newcomer from the Patriots, only played just a little bit, Titus Howard at right guard, and Blake Fisher at right tackle. Now, the thing is, this was always going to be worth talking about because we didn't necessarily know where guys were going to play along the offensive line. They had a few spots that were up for grabs. Basically, it seemed like everything except left tackle was probably up for grabs because they signed. It was clear that they had signed Cam Robinson to be their left tackle, but where was everybody else going to play in the other four spots? And those three interior spots, of course, as we talked ad nauseum, are critical because that's where they have largely underperformed, particularly at guard. What exactly is that supposed to look like? They didn't go out necessarily and get a guard that made you feel like the problem was necessarily fixed. And then lo and behold, it's Lakin Tomlinson was probably the least bit of surprise unless you were expecting Titus Howard to be in that spot. Lakin Tomlinson is their most experienced and probably their most accomplished left guard that's on the team. And so that part of, because like he's actually been good before. And so that part of it made sense. You slot him there. But then Jake Andrews at center and Titus Howard at guard, these things were revealing. I thought these things were truly revealing, even if that doesn't end up being the guys that they go with at those respective positions. The fact that the first time that we watched them without our cameras out, the first time that we watched them without our phones glued to what they're doing, the first group that they show us is that one. And look, it could change. It's not like any of these guys are so great or established that this position is locked in and these are the five and that you go with it. But it does kind of give you some insight on what they think the solution could or might be as they talk about having a bunch of guys that can do a bunch of different things and we not necessarily knowing who's going to do what. So so this is interesting because you got Andrews, who is a former offensive lineman at Troy, worked with the offensive line coach Cole Popovich, right? Jake Andrews is that like the connection is pretty clear there. Was coached by Cole Popovich in college, then played for the Patriots, but not for Popovich or for Nick Caley, I don't believe, but definitely at Troy from the way I remember it, the sequence working. So so who knows what the connection is there that got him to the Patriots, right? But playing under a coach that had just come from the Patriots. But so there's that connection. And then of course Cole Popovich's connection to Nick Caley and Nick Caley's connection to Nick Caserio. And then there's kind of the whole thread if you're trying to weave it and trying to figure out why this makes sense. Also, I will point out it's it's cool that they're looking at center as a spot where it's not like anybody played their way into that position. Like we talk so much about guard, and I feel like kind of overlooked the fact that they had to move away from what they were doing at center and play their center at guard. And now that guy is perhaps a depth piece, and that's Juice Scruggs is a depth piece at guard, which is cool. If he can fill that role, that part of it is fine. But it did kind of create or establish a new problem or another problem and something else, another need that they needed to fill. And so there perhaps it could be some continuity with the new offense. So you got to kind of forget about what you've seen before in a lot of ways and think about what they're bringing in that's new. And this is the person that perhaps has the most familiarity and potential upside to fill that role and to fill that void, even if he's not even who knows if he's perhaps the most talented player, but if he's the best fit for what they're trying to do, you can definitely explain that. Jake Andrews at center, I just thought it was revealing that it wasn't either Juice Scruggs, Jared Patterson, and then the fact that not only that, you didn't even have Juice Scruggs really taking reps at center. It was Andrews, Patterson, and I believe Eli Cox, the undrafted free agent that they've got out there. So some a little bit of insight on how they might be viewing their own guys. And then of course Titus Howard at right guard. Is this I didn't frame it this way on the show today, but I'll do it here. I feel like could this be like the compromise? is Titus Howard at right guard the compromise? I wonder if it is just a matter of Titus Howard not necessarily being the same that he was physically, or that they were hoping that he would be when they signed him to that contract extension to play right tackle. But he does have the quote unquote positional flex to bump inside and has played, to his credit, admirably at guard, even when I didn't necessarily like that they were doing it. it. I feel like it's worked out okay, worked out fine, and who knows how much better he could be at it if it was something that he trained at more consistently, like it appears that he's doing now, going into these practices. So, so what I mean by the compromise is he still plays. He bumps in and plays guard, but now he's over to the right side, and since he's shown you he can handle guard, now you put him on the side that it looks like he's probably most comfortable playing on, and it fills a role, it fills a void. And could that be your best option? He's a highly paid and experienced player to begin with. Could that be your best option? I don't know the answer, but it wasn't. I don't think in all of the like pretend pretend Texans offensive line mock-ups that I tried to do, I don't feel like I had many, if any, with Titus Howard at right guard, as much as it kind of makes sense as a clear compromise. Bump him into where he makes sense and where he's shown himself to be useful, but allow him to play on the side that he's most comfortable playing on, or where he's played on the most. So I don't know if right guard is the future for Titus Howard, or what exactly they're going to do with him, but it does seem like they still value his versatility and his experience on the right side. You got to figure factors into him being over there, and so you got that. And then Blake Fisher at right tackle is probably another one that wasn't all that surprising. But Seth said something. Seth Payne, former Texan morning show host, Sports Radio 610, was doing a show with him this morning, Thursday morning, and he brought up a point about how, like, don't just assume, and we're not making any assumptions about this offensive line and what they presented. It's just noteworthy that it was the first one that we saw as they're trying to remake it. But don't take for granted that the right tackle position is locked up when you consider Ariante Ursary and how much they like this guy, and just how massive of a man this guy is. And that can just bring us to our next point, which is that I think that Ariante Ursary has a chance to play. I think he has a chance to play from the looks of it. I don't think that there's much room for at left tackle unless Cam Robinson either just underperforms or gets injured. But I don't think that those things are out of the realm of possibility. And if that be the case, there he is in line to kind of go in there and try to shine and do his thing. But also on the right side, and I point this out because he was doing work on both sides. Most of his experiences as left tackle, but they were working him at both sides. And Seth brought up the point of, if all things are equal with Blake Fisher and where he's at in his development going into year two, and where they think that Ariante Ursary is, even just moving over to the other side, but like ready to play immediately. If all things are equal, you should put that big old dude out there, and that should be your right tackle, even if he's actually your left tackle in waiting. And that means that Blake Fisher's your swing tackle and he's your right tackle in waiting. Or does it mean that you feel differently about Blake Fisher? I don't know what the exact answer to that is. And I know that there's a little bit up and down on what we saw from him last year, but only a second year player. The guy that they just brought in seems like he might be the higher upside guy. Like, when they talk about competition, it's real. It's real. They've actually created that. Now, whether you like that or not is its own thing. But I feel like right tackle is just as much of a competition as anyone, even though we've already kind of penciled in Blake Fisher as a guy that's played a lot of right tackle, a guy that they drafted to be a right tackle, and who then played right tackle for them some as a rookie. So, and then of course, it was the first one that they showed us in this particular situation at practice. So, like it seems like it's leaning toward it being Blake Fisher, but Ariante Ursary getting some work out there and being as big as he is, how quickly can he pick it up? Like I thought maybe you bump him in. Like this is the first time I got to see the guy in person. If I'm being honest about it, like I didn't make it out to rookie minicamp, and I hadn't laid eyes on him, and I get now why it is like he almost seems too big to be a guard. Like he's so damn big that it feels like you got to put him on the outside. Like and so I get why he's attacking, especially if he can move at that size. I get 100% why the idea that I had before about hey maybe he could play guard, why that doesn't work as much as say like let's just make Titus Howard a full-time guard and see if this guy has more upside at tackle. The way that Titus once did. But man, massive dude. And I think that when they talk about mixing and matching and when they talk about competition, I feel like they're talking about all four. They got to be talking about all four of those spots. Got to be talking about it. So those are the main observations, man. I think one thing that I'm interested to talk with Seth Payne about is Derek Stingley fielding punts, and maybe we can talk about that later here on the podcast. But he doesn't appear to be a big fan of it. But when I saw it, I got really excited about Stingley fielding punts. I think that that's going to be if they end up leaning into that. I feel like that's just another way to unlock Derek Stingley. I've been trying to think of ways to get him the football more. Like obviously he's great at what he does, elite at what he does already. And we joke about putting him on offense or having him run plays on offense, but like special teams feels like the more realistic look for Derek Stingley. So that was another observation where it was like, I mean, I don't know where they're going with this. I don't know if this is something that they're actually going to do with their all-pro guy that they just paid, but since he's just been paid, maybe there's more of a comfort level of going out there and playing special teams and fielding punts and just being a little bit more dynamic with the football in his hands. I think he's got an ability and potential to do that. So I'm excited for it. All right. So while I was at Texans practice, I actually ended up having to leave a little bit early because we got the news that Ronel Blanco was going to miss the rest of the season to have Tommy John surgery. And apparently he's going to have it next week. It is a massive blow. It was kind of the concern when you hear about elbow issues and, like basically when he goes down, you're like, oh, here we go again. And we had just had the news for Astros fans. You had just gotten the news not that long ago about Hayden Wesneski, and you're sitting over here waiting on pitchers to come back from Tommy John surgery, wondering when does Christian Javier come back, wondering how long is it going to take for Luis Garcia or how many setbacks is Luis Garcia going to have in his rehab. JP France has been gone. You just got Lance McCullers back, and we can mention that and how he looked the other night in just a moment. But this is a massive blow for the Astros. And I thought it was cool that on the same day that you get that news, that at least Lance McCullers could go out there for you and give you something that makes you feel like you still got a middle of the rotation type of guy in Lance McCullers. Like with all of the questions about what is he going to be like after not pitching for a couple of years? Is he better in the bullpen? Is his day done? Should he just retire? They need to trade Lance. And y'all know all of the nonsense that was out there about the death threats, which was weird. Everything about it was weird, from the idea that it would happen to the presentation of it and the timing of it. Like everything about that whole thing was odd. But here you get this moment where he pitches well, and the timing of his outing is just hours after you find out, or just a couple of hours after you find out or officially announced that Ronel Blanco is going to miss the rest of the season to have Tommy John surgery. And so now that leaves you with, if you include Lance McCullers for the Astros, three guys that you know or feel like you can trust in your rotation. after it after you thought you had at least 5, and that whatever it was that Lance McCullers might give you, in addition to what you already had, it was just gravy. It was surplus pitching, and everybody, especially a contender, can use extra starters. If you plan to be around in the postseason, it doesn't hurt to have 6 or 7 starters out there that can give you some work, either starting or in relief. Like it helped the Texas Rangers win the World Series just a couple of years ago. It is a method that the Astros could certainly utilize if all of these guys could stay healthy, and they just can't. It's rough. I know my guys on In the Loop, where, shameless plug, you can find me every Tuesday at 11. I'm in with them for an hour. Reginald Atula and John Lopez and Figgy Fig. But I know that, no, was it after the Wisniewski injury that they did the segment on asking the question of, do the Astros have bad luck, or do they have a systemic problem when it comes to pitchers and these elbow injuries? And I just couldn't help but just be like, yes, 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 yes. I know, and I understand the distinction and the differences that they're trying to make between the two, like luck versus, hey, you're doing something wrong or you're not doing something right. But it felt like, or I should say feels like, even more so now, because this injury has now happened since then, since they did that segment, right? This was about the Wisniewski injury. Now we're talking about Renel Blanco. It feels like the answer is yes. They have a systemic problem that is bad luck with these pitcher injuries. Like maybe the answer is both, but whatever it is, like there is clearly a problem. Like back-to-back years where you have starters go down with Tommy John, essentially back-to-back. It happened with Christian Javier and Luis Garcia. It's happening here in this case. And of course, I mentioned JP Francis, somebody else that's been out for a while. But like you have seen a lot of this, man. A lot of didn't even mention Justin Verlander from several years ago, and maybe he was just due for, it was just like his time. I don't know, but this is this is a blow. And also, the headline, the other news piece of it is that it kind of solidifies the Astros position as a buyer at the trade deadline for pitching. Because the reality for the Astros is that they are good enough, certainly not bad enough to be to like tank. Like we'll see what ends up happening with Framber Valdez. I think that's kind of an interesting conundrum, if you will. Even if I don't think that they're gonna make a deal or like deal him away because they're trying to win the world, they probably still feel like they can win the World Series. But like to that point, I think the Astros are, and in large part because of their pitching, they're among a dozen plus teams who should feel like they're capable of winning the World Series this year. Like I feel like the Astros fall in that range. Like honestly, if you look at it, and Major League Baseball is cooling this way this year, you've got some teams that look like they're the elite. Like the Dodgers look like a super team. They are a super team. Okay, they're coming off a World Series win and they're built like a super team. The Yankees feel like some kind of version of that. They just went to the World Series. There are a few teams like this, but and the Phillies are really good. The Cubs are really good this year. There are good teams out there, but there still feels like across the game, at least half of the teams have to feel like they've got a shot, right? Like even if they're not necessarily built like the Dodgers or built like a super team, they're playing enough competitive baseball to where they should feel like they got a shot. And the Astros are among those teams. So they should absolutely be buyers at the trade deadline. And I think that this solidifies them in that position. And they were already there, I think, with the Wisniewski injury. But now you're talking about Framber Valdez, Hunter Brown, and Lance McCullers at the top of your rotation, or at least as the most trustworthy members of your rotation as of now. and like trying to rely on some combination of Ryan Gusto and Colton Gordon, who Colton Gordon I feel really good about. And this is no knock on either one of those two guys, but the stakes feel a little bit higher, right? Like the stakes feel a little bit higher given what I'm talking about the parity and just like the window being open in part because of pitching being a huge strength of the team, and then also the overall landscape is not so overwhelming that you need to be the Astros of old to be competitive, or that you need to be the Astros of old to have a shot at winning the World Series. This group of Astros might actually be just fine if they can get this pitching thing figured out. And I'm not entirely sure that they are going to be able to do that because you're waiting on these other guys. Spencer Arrighetti is another name out there that I didn't even mention. You don't have him, and we're not exactly sure when he's going to come back, but it's going to push up against the trade deadline, probably right before the trade deadline, but you're not sure what you're going to get. It's a thumb injury. And that one is definitely bad luck, right? Like you could probably why I didn't even mention it, because you put it to the side, it's its own thing, but it matters. It matters if you're gonna lose two guys to Tommy John. You can't just have some guy break his thumb on on some kind of freak play playing catch in the outfield. And not to finger point on that. It's just when you talk about bad luck, it is kind of shitty. It's a shitty feeling. You're like, man, I'm down three starting. I got it's literally one step forward, three steps back when you think about it. With Lance McCullers having 12 strikeouts and not a win for him, but a win for the Astros because he did give up the home run that gave up the lead. But the Astros ended up coming back and winning the game. He struck out 12, had something like 18 swings and misses, something like 5 ground balls. I mean, he was not dominant again because he did give up that homer, but it was a quality start. And he seemed like, if dominant is not the word, Lance McCullers seemed like he was in control in a way that felt new and different compared to the previous starts, and more in line with what you have seen from him in the past. And so there's the one step forward of getting Lance McCullers back, but the three steps back of two of these guys, and Hayden Wesneski and Ronel Blanco, now needing Tommy John surgery. And by the way, Spencer Arrighetti is still out with a broken thumb. So clearly the Astros are going to be in the market for a starting pitcher. It will be interesting to see. I mentioned this to Seth, like how well can they continue to thread this needle of let's go get the exact starting pitcher that we need. They it feels like, or pitcher period. When they've done it in the case of getting bullpen guys, like they do this every season. Last year it was Yusei Kikuchi. Who is going to be the Yusei Kikuchi for the Astros this year? Because they need him now, probably even more so than they did then. Okay, so we can end this with OKC making it to the finals. We have a final list. By the time a lot of you get to this, we'll probably have both of our finalists, because I'm expecting the Indiana Pacers to go ahead and wrap things up. But like it is going to be a Pacers Thunder finals, right? And if we can just keep this on the Thunder for a second, because I feel like the big conversation about them, especially based on how they're built, the conversation about them is like, is this the start of a dynasty? Can they win the championship, first of all? But how many championships can they win? Is this the model, like the model franchise, the model way for running a team, a small market that made smart trades and smart draft picks and collected draft picks and just kind of maneuvered in a way that is just like something that you would use as a tutorial for how to run a franchise, for how to run an NBA franchise? It is that good. A lot of teams like the Rockets, or a lot of Rockets fans, hey, what can we replicate from that? How do we get a Shea, and how do we get a team that just does everything well like this? Look, the Thunder, in my view, they are certainly built to be in the mix for years to come. But I think that the beauty of the league right now is how many teams that it feels like they have a window, and how the potential movement around the league can quickly change what that looks like, and what a team's window looks like. Like, think about the Mavericks, for example, as a team that was just in the finals last year, and how differently not only their team looks, but their trajectory looks, and how much it's changed twice since then. Like, we haven't even gotten to the finals yet. And one of the teams that was in the finals last year has since traded its superstar, but also acquired a pretty good player in a trade that was widely panned, and rightfully so, but still acquired a pretty good player, but one that is often injured and that was injured down the stretch of the season. And oh, by the way, the players that they kept, like the great player that they kept, Kyrie Irving, had a catastrophic injury. And so they bottom out, luck up and get the number one overall pick. And so their trajectory changes from going into the season as the defending Western Conference champion to, oh shit, they've traded Luka. What's going to happen to the future of this franchise? To, oh man, this outside chance of winning the lottery, and oh my God, they won it, and they get Cooper Flag, and now what does the direction of that team look like? You got to have like a secondary, like a whole new conversation about them than what you were having even just a few months ago. It shows you how quickly things can change, and I think that the Thunder, for me, they have one of the more ideal situations as it stands. To me, with the best team in the Western Conference, they got young stars and all of that. But how quickly do you think that changes for the Thunder if, say, Giannis goes to join Wemby, or if he joins the Rockets, or if Luka's healthy and in shape, or if Anthony Edwards takes another leap, right? If Amin Thompson is like the star in the making that so many people think that he is, if the Nuggets, if they get healthy and they ever commit to defense the way it seemed like they did the championship year, and like the only thing that's missing from them, if they're ever healthy enough and committed enough to defense around Jokic, is that the team that we're just going to easily forget about because now it's been a couple of years since they won the title, right? And it could be a one and done, but they're still right there in the mix. The Clippers were a team that I don't think anyone really wanted to face in the playoffs. And it does seem like the time is running out on that fantasy of what the Clippers could be. But James Harden was an all-NBA player, and Kawhi Leonard for long stretches looked pretty much as good as we've seen him. And I'm not exaggerating about that. Like, he at times looked like Kawhi Leonard of old, or just as good as Kawhi Leonard of old ever looked. So it's not, to me, it's just not like the Thunder have this clear path to dominance the way you might say when you're predicting or trying to predict what the next potential dynasty of the league might be. You know, like the Warriors had a much clearer path to that. And of course, they went out and got Kevin Durant, and that changed the calculus a great deal. But there was a much clearer path for them at that time, I felt like, than there is for, say, Oklahoma City right now. They really, to me, I think the Thunder has pretty much all you can ask for. It's a team that is built to be consistently competitive and among the best in the league. But to me, there's just far too much talent spread across the board to look at one team and say, this one's going to run the league for years to come. Far too much talent to do that. No one really, I don't think, like, no one really has that luxury right now. I would say I felt, and the Thunder haven't even won the title yet. I'm not even sure. We'll see how this thing plays out. Thunder Pacers, because I mean, I'm anticipating it, but like, I would say, despite the fact that the Thunder have not even won the championship yet, and still might not, because the Pacers got some walk you down. They got some walk you down tendencies, boy, don't they? But I felt about the Celtics last year similarly to how I feel about the Thunder right now. Even though the Celtics weren't quite as young and they're far more expensive of a team, the one that won the title just last year, I still looked at the core. Even if you're just thinking about the core as Jason Tatum or Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum and whatever else you can keep around Jason Tatum. Like I still looked at the core and how they built that thing and just the competence of everybody in that organization. It seems like for the most part, I still looked at it and said, man, even if it's just like for the next year or two, however long they keep this core together, they got a shot to win the finals. I'm picking them to get to the finals and like win the East and get to the finals. And now we see how quickly that has changed. And that was a conversation that was even going into this before Jason Tatum got injured. But how long can you keep guys together? Eventually, guys become too expensive, and you got to make business decisions, or you're paying the second apron and all of these other kind of like cap complications that come with winning. I'm not here for saying that it's like just a sure thing that Oklahoma City is just going to rattle off a bunch of titles or anything just because they finally made the finals, even if they win the finals. This thing, to me, when you look across the NBA, is still wide open, and it's one of the more fun parts about watching the league. To me, Oklahoma City definitely here to stay, but not alone. The Rockets coming for you. Don't forget. I ain't lying. Don't forget, man. The Rockets coming for you, man. We'll see what they do. Might they get Giannis? Might they keep it simple and just go do the Kevin Durant thing? Because I don't feel like they have to give up a lot. And they might be a Kevin Durant away from really fucking some shit up. Excuse my French. Figure if you made it this far in the podcast, you really rock with me and understand that I'm coming from a real place, man. They could fuck some shit up. We shall see, man. That is it for this episode of the B Block Podcast. Make sure you are subscribed. Make sure you rate. Make sure you review. Tell a friend. This is, again, a Foolish Club Media production. Shout out to Foolish Club Media. And until next time, y'all be good. Beast guy from Hiram Clark, do it. Beast guy from Hiram Clark, 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 do the Hiram Clark.